Hi, everybody. I'm Olivia Scott, the Associate Professor of Advertising here at Loyola University, New Orleans, founder of Emerge Alliance's marketing consultancy, and the host of Behind the Ad, where we peel the layers of the media, advertising, and marketing onion back to demystify the industry for you. People see amazing ads everywhere, but truly behind many ads is research. When many people hear the term research, they often get bored. They may yawn. But I'm here to let you know today, with my special guest, that research can actually be fun. And most importantly, I want you to understand that it is a critical step that skipping will actually cost you time and money. Today, we have a market leader in research here to talk about the different types of research conducted, how you can inject research into your businesses, and why it is critical to campaign success. Former corporate attorney, now market research entrepreneur, and owner of New Orleans Perspectives, Chris Cantrall is here with us today to talk about research. Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us today. I want to get right into talking about research. It is your world. First of all, I want you to tell us, you're a former corporate attorney. Please enlighten us. How and why did you shift from the world of law over to research?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that research can be fun because that's really why I made the shift. I enjoy what I do every day. Every day is different. We get to work with normal people because customers in the corporate customers at the end of the day are often normal people. And that's who we get to work with every day. Every day is a new project. It's always interesting and engaging to me. So it was nice to shift from that stuffy legal world.
Tell us a little bit more about what you actually do with New Orleans Perspectives.
So I am an owner of New Orleans Perspectives. I run day-to-day operations, manage and oversee employees, and we primarily do two different things. We provide a space for people to do research in, what people would often think of as a focus group facility.
Okay.
And then we recruit people from the general community all across America, including New Orleans. We recruit them to do the actual research.
Okay. So tell us more. What are three different ways research plays a role in advertising campaign development?
So one good way is just knowing who your customers actually are. A lot of times companies don't necessarily know who their customers are on a deep level. You might have their contact information, you might know what they're buying, but you don't know necessarily everything about them. So we do a lot of research that's sort of preliminary of just getting to know the customers. What do they want? What do they like? It isn't necessarily targeted, it's just getting to know who your customers are. And you can kind of develop on that by segmenting your customers and saying, this group of customers is group A, this group of customers is group B. You can build on that for later research purposes.
So, when you talk about customer research, I just want to pause and let everybody know, because it's my number one pet peeve in advertising and marketing, which I've been doing forever now. When you ask business owners, who is your product for? They always are going to say what, Chris? They always say, everybody loves my product.
Yeah.
And I always refute and say, okay, I'm not saying that that's not true. They're not going to like your body scrub or your new water or whatever. But when you're doing marketing and advertising, it is incredibly important that you have a focused effort, especially when you launch your product, so that you can really use your media budget effectively. And your advertising campaign can actually appeal to someone. Because in your ad campaign, you really cannot appeal to everyone, which is why research, going back to what Chris just said, is so incredibly important to help you understand who's going to like your product, what they like about your products. You can actually feature those things in your ad campaign. So I'm sorry, I got a little excited about that when you said that. So
no, that's a great point. I would say that some of the most successful people in marketing know who their customers aren't. Because if you spend advertising money targeting someone who is not your customer, you might as well burn it. It's no good.
Burn it up.
And you see it. You can see it in the real world when you know a little about research of saying they are targeting the wrong person with that ad, and they're asking the wrong people their opinion. And if someone isn't your customer, their opinion doesn't matter for the purposes of an advertising campaign.
Okay. All right. So give us a couple of more.
So a couple more. A second point would be making sure that your messaging is doing what you want it to do. So during an ad campaign, if it's something a little longer that you can have time to do research in, you can poll people as you go along and see, is my messaging landing? Are people getting the opinion that I want them to have? Are they thinking what I want them to think? It's okay if they're not. Sometimes you can adjust on the fly if that's in the cards. But you want to make sure your advertising is doing what you intended to do.
Right. And when we talk about that, I'm just going to keep coming in, interjecting. For anybody, my students watching or anybody else watching, it's really important to think about what is the communication goal of your ad. Are you trying to shift perception? Are you trying to get them to buy? What is the objective of the ad? And as Chris is saying, if you're trying to get them to shift the perception of thinking that you are X to become Y, when you watch the actual result of the campaign, is it actually doing what you want it to do? If the objective of the ad, which many ads, that's the objective, is to buy something, are they buying? If it's to visit a website, are they visiting the website? Are they doing what you want them to do? A lot of times, we get, when we're designing ads in the advertising design world, we get so cutesy and so artsy, but the call to action is either missing or it's hidden. So really wanting to make sure that we have a skillful approach to the art of the design of the ad to actually be intentional.
This kind of ties into the second point as well, but thinking about how your ad affects even people you aren't necessarily targeting. So we see this a lot with, for example, say a company is looking at getting a new customer base. Obviously, you're going to test the new customer base if you can, but you also want to test the existing customer base. You want to make sure there's no unintended consequences of your advertising. Sometimes brands only test the new demographic, and it turns out that the old demographic also sees some of their marketing materials, existing customers, and they don't like the ad. They don't like the marketing material. It turns them off from the brand. So we do a lot of work where the marketing campaign has been done. It's not even targeted at the group of people we're researching, but we're researching them to make sure that that current customer base isn't upset by what they're seeing or kind of thinks in a different way than the company would like them to think.
So let's talk about measuring campaigns' effectiveness. One of the things that I find when we're developing ad campaigns is, again, many of us get caught up in the art and the creativity of creating a campaign. And we launch it, we get the budget to launch it, but then no one actually measures whether or not the advertising campaign was effective. Can you share with us different research methodologies or types that actually measure a campaign's effectiveness?
Sure. So when I think of measuring campaign effectiveness from a research perspective, I like to think of both a qualitative and a quantitative approach. Okay. I think at the most broad level, you can do something like a large online survey, and you can literally ask people, did you see this campaign? Sometimes campaigns aren't broad enough to do that, but there are many campaigns that are. If everyone in a state or everyone in a city is supposed to see a campaign, you can do a survey of the general population and just ask them, did you see this campaign? You can follow up and say, what did you think about it? But we've done a lot of work where we just ask, right? And we can measure engagement just from polling the general population. So that's a great method if it's available.
Chris, do you guys ever do pre and post where before you go into the market with an ad campaign, you measure to see what a brand's awareness level is, and then afterwards you see if there's been a lift?
We do that. That's kind of a big budget thing. It's one of those items where I think every company would love to do that, and then when faced with the cost, they scale back. We don't do as many pre-campaigns as people would like to do because of realistic concerns.
So then how do you know if there's been an impact if you don't do pre? I'm just curious.
So without doing pre, in a post-campaign, I think you could do it for something where you have an idea of what the baseline awareness is. So a new ad campaign, right? You can discuss, you can, in the post-campaign, ask questions that only someone who had seen the campaign would be able to answer potentially. Maybe you have a new brand mascot, let's say, and if someone's seen that mascot, they've seen the new campaign because pre-awareness is 0. So it's obviously far better to have pre, but you can finagle some ways to get in some level of awareness. It's never going to be as accurate, but you can try.
Okay. Speaking of cost, why is research so expensive? Can you tell us why?
Well, good research is expensive for a number of reasons. A big one is if you want good results from people you're surveying, you generally have to pay them to do that. When you don't pay people, rates drop down and quality of response drops. So the best research results come when you pay people a reasonable amount of money for their time and effort and energy. Okay. That's a huge one. Another big factor is you have to pay research professionals. You have to pay people who are experienced, know what they're doing, have skills in analysis. Professionals are expensive. That's the second big one. And then if you need a physical space to do research in, you're going to have to rent the space. You're going to have to pay for things like the cameras and the recording, and you're going to have to pay to feed people. So everything starts to add up really quickly when you want to do something in person.
Right. So you've just actually led into the next thing I was going to talk to you about, which is the fact that we know so many brands internationally, nationally, they skimp, and they often skip research because of cost and because of money and because of time. Can you tell us, are there some low-lift research tools that they can access, brands, especially small businesses can access, so they can get the benefits of conducting research but without all the cost?
Yeah, so this is a topic I think a lot about. I work with a lot of small businesses who are intimidated by the idea of research, and I always tell people that research is a giant spectrum. Even calling an existing customer and just getting their opinion on 5 different things, that's research, right? If you apply a little bit of methodology behind it, like for example, I'm going to talk to 10 random past clients and I'm going to ask them all the same 5 questions. You've just done a little market research project. I think a lot of people, they like the idea of the gold standard of hire a third party who's not biased so your customer feels that they can speak honestly. But if you can't afford that, just being a little business owner and calling up a few clients and asking them a few questions in a repeatable way with quantifiable data can be good research.
Okay. Awesome. So just a few more things I want to get your insight on. So today we see a lot of those online surveys. You're on Google and it's like, give us your opinion, XYZ. How do you ensure the quality of online surveys, especially for those small business owners who want to use them? How do we ensure the quality that's not being bots, or how do we know it's actually good integrity of the data?
So my saying with online surveys is garbage in, garbage out. And it's not just online surveys, it's any survey. Garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have your own panel of people to do the research surveys that you know and you trust, you have to trust someone else to do it. So working with a company you trust is how you're going to get good results from data. There are plenty of less scrupulous survey companies, and there are plenty of reliable, reputable survey companies. So if you want to do something online at relatively low cost, you're going to have to work with a company you can trust, because if they have an engaged panel of people to do research, they will give you answers that are 100 times more reliable for research purposes.
So we're all living in a post-pandemic world right now, and your industry, I'm sure, has been affected as well. Can you share with us, have you seen any shifts in the industry of advertising research with the pandemic? And in general, what do you see in terms of the trends in the future of advertising research?
The big trend was the death of in-person research. I think it's a temporary death. I think after 2 years, there's been some life back in in-person research. We saw a lot of people moving online and doing it clumsily. Online research is not just like doing in-person research, on a Zoom call, and it's the same technique. It's definitely a different beast. There are some pluses. I think underserved communities that don't have good physical facilities to do research in person, they're much better served by a Zoom call, right? You can get a wide variety of opinions from an entire huge geographic area. For example, you can survey people all over Louisiana at the same time on a Zoom call. So those are some advantages. I do see the industry is shifting back in person because of some clumsy execution. I think there's been a lot of subpar research that's gone on. There's been a lot of great online research, but there's a lot of not so great online research, and more companies are starting to realize that they are missing something from the lack of the in-person component. So my guess is that we'll see more and more and more in-person research, and just research in general, because consumer preferences have shifted so much and people are trying to get a handle on it.
Can you tell us a little bit more about subpar research? What are qualities and characteristics of subpar research? How do you know it's subpar research?
How do you know it's subpar research? I know it when I see it. I know.
Which is fair.
Yeah, no. Subpar research when you're watching it. I mean, part of it is just a kind of a gut feeling, but just watching, what are the questions being asked? How are the people who are participating in the group being managed? Especially if you're talking something like a focus group. People need to be attuned and attentive. They need to be paying attention. So when the group isn't being managed properly or moderated properly, people's attention flags, and if they're not paying attention, what exactly are they responding to?
Right.
You see a sort of diminished efficacy for online focus groups if the moderator doesn't know how to perform that particular job.
Cool. And then you mentioned underserved communities not having a solid research facility. In general, what makes a good or bad research facility? I know you guys have one, New Orleans Perspective, so shout out for you guys if we want to come by and do some research at your location in New Orleans. But let's say that we don't have access to it, or just in general, what makes a good or bad research facility?
So setting aside, a purpose-made focus group facility, right? A comfortable place where you can comfortably fit, say, maximum 12 people, but potentially 8 people. So comfort. If people feel comfortable, they'll be more likely to share open and honestly. And then if you don't have the space, you need some tech set up, right? You need a second room where people can watch in the back, because if you don't have the classic focus group one-way mirror, you need a camera and a TV monitor running to a second room. But more than anything, anyone can figure out the IT and audio-visual hurdles. But more than anything is having a space that people can get to and they can feel comfortable in, and they can sit down for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and just talk.
Can you tell us a little bit about the range that you can expect to pay a research participant? And I'd imagine it varies from like a 30-minute to an hour or 2-hour survey, and depending on the client category. But can you give us any sense of, for anybody watching who has a small business who's like, you know what? Chris is right. I need to start doing research better, and I need to figure out a budget. I'm going to give New Orleans Perspectives a call, but how much should I plan to pay my participants?
So I know a lot of business owners have seen online surveys, and it's maybe a couple of bucks or some points in a system. For good research, for something like, say, a 30-minute one-on-one interview, you're talking about at least $25 to start, and that would be on the low end. For getting a group of people in a focus group, you're talking about paying at least $100 a person. These days, more like $125, because inflation has hit focus group payments just like everything else.
Okay.
And it can go all the way up to, for a full day, which we do research projects that take an entire day of people's attention, something like $350. But if you have to pick a number on average for a reasonable research project, it would be in the $100 to $125 per person range.
You are quite an esteemed man. You own New Orleans Perspectives, and I also understand that you also are the chief bubble teologist at Bubble Teology. So I love bubble tea. I'm very excited to hear more about that. But can you tell us, what is your secret sauce to success?
If I knew, I would put it in a bottle.
Pun intended.
I think just restlessness. I just can't. I'm always on to the next thing. I think it would be fair to call me a jack of all trades, master of none to an extent. And I never turn down a good opportunity.
So curiosity.
I hate the phrase, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. I hate it. I'm always fixing things that aren't broken, and sometimes I break them. But I think most of the time I make them better.
Awesome. So keep learning. Chris, thank you so much for coming today and for also coming to my class. Chris is one of our guest speakers who comes to our advertising research class here at Loyola University, New Orleans. So I hope that today has been informative, and that for any small business owner or business owner, period, or brand manager who is thinking about, should I do research or should I not, I'm hopeful that you will consider doing research, even if it's something small and not too expensive. And if you're in the New Orleans area or the region, I hope that you will consider New Orleans Perspectives to actually conduct your research with. I hope to see you on future episodes. Thanks so much.